Hey guys, thank y'all for joining us. If this is your first time here, my name is Jed Beasley. I'm the manager for the Hunting and Fishing Academy here in Tennessee. Really grateful for you guys spending a little bit of time with us tonight. We're going to be talking about fishing some small streams and creeks and rivers. Tennessee is full of those little small waterways and they offer lots of big fishing opportunities. So excited to introduce you guys to some of those opportunities here. We want to answer your questions. Before I go any further, I do have a special guest on with us tonight. Some of you guys, if you watch any YouTube, you might notice or might recognize Mr. John Dalton with Creek Fishing Adventures. So, John, why don't you just give us a little intro kind of about yourself and you know what it is you do in the fishing world and maybe a little bit about your YouTube page.
So I'm a huge creek fishing fan, and I kind of got into it about 10 years ago. I've always been interested in it, but when I moved back over to East Tennessee about 10 years ago, I kind of got back into fishing small waterways, little bitty streams that you could jump across, and then also into like just fishing for everything. And I started a YouTube channel on creek fishing called Creek Fishing Adventures, and just to kind of document all the little places I was going. And I kind of just enjoyed it. It kept growing and growing. Now that's all I do full time. So I've been able to kayak, skinny waters to big rivers, fish all kinds of lakes, and wade and fish, so many different little streams, pretty much all over East Tennessee, but even Middle Tennessee area.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I found your YouTube page, John, probably about the same time I started in this job, and I know we've met a couple times and had lunch, and you've been to some of our in-person events. But I always really enjoyed watching your videos, and I'll make sure I link it in our resource email. So for the folks that haven't seen it, they can go check it out as well. But you're doing some really cool stuff, and I'm excited that you're here tonight because I think, like I told you, this is right up your alley and in your wheelhouse. So I think you'll have some really good insight for any questions that we get along the way. But all right. So by the end of this class, what we're here to talk about tonight is fishing small streams. We want you to be able to identify some of the common characteristics of a stream with fast flowing current. We're going to talk about some different types. We want you to be able to name 3 species commonly found in streams. There's over 300 fish species in the state of Tennessee, so we're not going to give you an exhaustive list tonight, but just a few that you can take home to remember for next time you go out and hit the water. And then we want you to recall the different sections of a stream. Let's jump right into talking about what we're here to talk about tonight, fishing small streams. This is kind of the flow of how things are going to look tonight. We're going to talk about defining what a small stream is. Tennessee's covered in water. We've got big lakes, we've got ponds, big rivers, small rivers. So we're going to talk about, building some framework around what a small stream is. And then we're going to talk about some common species found, food sources that the game fish are eating, and maybe some gear and strategy and things that you can start to implement when you go out to start fishing as well. If y'all give me just a second, I've got a barking dog back here. I will be right back. Whoop, I think my wife's got him. Never mind. Okay. So that's the outline for tonight. And then, like I said, if you have any questions at any point, just send them in. We'll make time to stop and answer those. So when we talk about small streams, creeks, or rivers, what are we talking about? Obviously, every waterway is a little bit different, but we're going to put some general frameworks around the types of streams or types of creeks that you might find in Tennessee, just so when we throw terminology around, you can kind of visualize what it is we're talking about. Again, this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all. We're going to speak in kind of generalizations just to give you an idea of what it is we're talking about. But like John was talking about earlier, when you think small streams or creeks, we're thinking wadable waterways, really. Like what you're seeing in that picture right there. You can get out and wade. We're not talking about really deep water. You can take small vessels like kayaks or a canoe or some kind of drift boat. It's shallower water generally. And so when you think about that too, there's some other considerations to take into account. One is, here in East Tennessee, we have a lot of high elevation streams. I know they're different across different parts of the state, but up here we've got a lot of streams that have very fast flowing current. The water's moving very quickly. And typically in those types of streams, you're going to have shallower water, so it's going to look very similar to what you're seeing in those pictures there. You're not going to have real deep depth. It's going to be shallow, cool water temps. It's coming out of higher elevations a lot of times, so your water temperatures are going to be a little cooler. And you're going to have real rocky or gravelly bottoms, and that comes into play later on when we start talking about what type of fish species you find in these type of waterways. But again, as a generalization, you're going to have some fast-flowing current, shallow depths, cool water, rocky bottoms. But you might also find some places like this, maybe further down that stream before it leads out to a bigger lake or a bigger river, where you might have deeper pools, 3-4 foot of water, even more sometimes. You're going to have deep pools. The water's not going to be moving quite as fast. And so this time of year, you might have warmer water temps. And a lot of times you might find that the bottoms of those creeks or rivers, maybe they're more sandy than they are gravelly. Again, just some things to think about, and some visualizations to kind of put into your mind of what we're talking about when we talk about small streams, rivers, and creeks, things like that. So, John, I think this would be something that you could probably add some insight here as we go in through this, but really just wanted to start by kind of breaking down different sections of a river. And as somebody that's waded a lot of them, been up and down all kinds of creeks and streams, this probably is going to sound really familiar for you. And if you guys watched the trout fishing virtual class we did a few weeks ago, this will look familiar as well. But generally speaking, again, you're going to see these different patterns throughout the river or creek or stream. You're going to have riffles, which is where it gets really shallow. You're going to have lots of rocks, and there's going to be a lot of surface disturbance, meaning you're going to see that white water effect kind of on the top of the surface of the water. And then it's going to go out into what we call a run, which is a deeper water where it kind of starts to feed into those deeper pools. The water starts to calm down, and then it flows back down into what we call the tail out, which is where it's going to filter back down and eventually hit another ripple. And you'll notice that if you're in a creek, you're going to see these patterns. You'll have sections where there's deeper pools. You'll have sections where there's riffles. But one of the big things that I want to point out that's going to be big when you start talking about where to find fish are these eddies. That's where you might have some kind of obstruction. You have some kind of structure like a rock or a log, and it's going to force that current to kind of swirl backwards. And when you get that swirling effect, when we talk about food sources later, when we talk about bugs and all these other things that the fish are eating, they're going to get trapped in these eddies. That reverse current kind of keeps the water calm, and it keeps those food sources from just getting washed further and further downstream. They kind of collect right here on the surface of the water. So eddies are a big thing to look for. And again, it's where you find that water kind of going in that circular motion. It's not following the same flow that the rest of the current has. And then just to kind of give you another visualization of what that looks like. Right here, this is a good representation of fish feeding at the end of one of those riffles. So the left side of that image would be kind of where the riffle is. Food is coming down through those rocks and that shallow water, and it's going to start to settle down into these deeper pools. Those fish will stack up a lot of times at the base of those riffles and catch food as they're coming over through that. It's like a small assembly line of sorts. They just wait for something to come over those riffles. They're stacked up. We're waiting for that to come over the surface where they can go out and get whatever it is that's coming over the surface. John, I know this says trout, but I know you've probably got some really good examples of seeing other types of fish do this as well. Do you have any insight there?
Yeah, this is very commonly overlooked for bass and sunfish. Now, trout people will get them, but as you can see, we're seeing like into the water. When you're standing above the water, this just looks like fast current. It may just look like fast current, and you think, well, there's nothing there. It's just fast current. But this is basically an eddy just underneath the water. These fish get in here, and bass especially, and they'll be sitting in there, and they're not even in current. They're down below a rock, and it's a perfect ambush spot. When something gets washed down above them, boom, they're up on it. So I've catched a lot more fish casting further up into that current than you think, because there's a lot of little breaks that you don't know that are there. And when the fish feed, they're in the current when they're feeding. Like that current is going to be a main thing of streams. Current drives it all. But yeah, this is a really good picture. And when people are looking at it, they might see like really fast current and like, oh, there can't be a fish in there. You'd be surprised. They get in here and they hide in these little spots and they find a way to get out of the current.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. That was one of the things that I always thought was so shocking when I would watch some of your videos. I'd watch you cast into that current. And a lot of times I had that same thought. I was like, what's he going to catch in all that water that's moving so quick? And sure enough, you'd snag something and pull something out. So it is really interesting just to kind of see it in action as well. But adding on to that, one of the big things in any kind of fishing, whether you're in a big lake or you're in a small creek, is you want to look for structure. Again, all these things, these images talk about trout, but it's the same for any fish species, right? You want to look for structure. You want to find those places where the fish feel safe and they're stacking up behind those things in these streams, and it gives them places to ambush prey. It gives them spawning locations. It gives them a place to escape predators that are hunting after them. So structure is a really big thing. And you hear people talk about it all the time. And honestly, it can be anything. It could be natural. It could be something that's not supposed to be in that stream or that creek. It's just somewhere that it gives the fish a place to hide and feel safe. And so, John, I want to hear some of your thoughts on this here in just a second. But very common places or like examples of what structure looks like is just large rocks, right? In some of these shallow water streams, if you got these big rocks like this out there, that can be a great place for fish to kind of congregate. If you've got trees or anything like that that's been blown down, or there's a big root ball in the middle, fish love to get inside all that kind of stuff and hide out. And so while you might be thinking, oh, I don't want to get snagged or hung up on any of that stuff, a lot of times that's where the fish are hiding. It could be tall grass. It could be a lot of different stuff. But structure is one of the big things that you want to take into account when you go out and go fishing. So, John, my question for you is, when you go out to a creek or some river, I mean, what are you looking for? I know we gave some examples here, but what's your thought process when you kind of start breaking down, where you want to try to find fish?
Yeah, I do a lot of kayaking, and in kayaking, you have to be really quick at making a right cast. Now, wading, you can kind of work your way around. So, and the more you do it, the more you'll figure out where the fish are. But I'm automatically looking for any kind of thing that is causing a disturbance in the river or in the creek. A rock, down trees are awesome. Also, think of fish as playing hide and seek with your kids or something. They can think they're hiding behind a pole that's 2 inches thick, so anything out there, there might be a fish that's hiding there and kind of waiting to ambush something that's unexpected, or they're sitting in the shade. It offers them a little bit of shade, or it just offers them a current break. And where there's a picture on here where there's like two rocks, and you can kind of see that the current is fast in between those two rocks. Now, a little bait fish that gets caught in there is going to get swept down, and that's a great little spot for something to be sitting to eat something. So anything that looks like it's out of the way of disturbance, when you're casting, you want to cast past it and bring your lure over it, either in front of it or behind it or over the top of it, because fish, they're pretty good at hiding. And whether it's 3 inches of water or 3 foot of water, they can be sitting in a little hiding spot and you'll never know they're there.
Yep. Yeah. So now that we've talked a little bit about that, again, I'm not going to give you an exhaustive list, because there's so many. We would be here for a day and a half just reading through the list of all the different fish you might find in a creek or some stream. And Tennessee is one of the most biologically diverse states in the country. It's probably the most biologically diverse inland state in the country. We've got mountain streams. We've got, the delta over near the Mississippi River, where all of our water over there feeds out into that big river. So there's a lot of different types of waterways in the state, and there's a lot of different fish species that you might find. And some of these you'll find everywhere. You'll find them in large rivers, big lakes, and then the smallest little streams that you wouldn't think you would find them. You'll find these things, and they're not all in all the same places. But again, I just want to give you some ideas of fish that you might see when you go out and go fish. And again, depending on where you are in the state, some of these might be more common than others. I didn't include any trout in this list just to kind of keep it to the other game species. We've talked about trout the past couple of weeks already. But again, we're just going to go through a quick list here. Lots of little panfish and sunfish. Bluegill, this is a really rather large bluegill right here, but you can still find bluegill in a lot of these smaller waterways. Very similar to the bluegill. You'll have red ear sunfish. John, I know I see you catch a lot of those. A great, fun little fish to catch. You've even got these green sunfish with all the different colorations on them. Again, they all look very similar, but they're always fun to catch. Very small game species of fish can still be big fun. The pumpkin seed, again, they all kind of have that similar shape and size of the bluegills, but just different colorations. They look really neat. You can find those a lot of times in these real small waterways where you might not otherwise find them. Rock bass, those are a lot of fun to catch. They got these big red eyes and kind of short, stocky bodies. They don't get super big, but one of the cool things about them is that they can actually live for a pretty long time, and so they get stockier and stockier. The healthier that they are, but they put up a pretty good fight for a little fish that's not much bigger than the palm of your hand a lot of times. So rock bass are a lot of fun to catch. Obviously, a lot of people like going after the larger bass as well. You can find largemouth and spotted bass, things like that, in smaller rivers. But when I think creeks and I think creek fishing, being from Middle Tennessee, this was what we went after more than anything, was the smallmouth. We love catching smallmouth in the creeks around home. It's not uncommon to find some in a big creek that are, 3-4 pounds. I think you can find some in there. That would be a pretty big smallmouth. But a lot of times, you're talking a pound, 2-pound fish, and they'll be in water that's so shallow you'd think, man, I didn't even think a smallmouth could be back here. And all of a sudden, there's a big one stacked up right there under some log. So smallmouth are great to go after. They're very aggressive. They're a lot of fun to catch. And then some of the other fish species that I wanted to get into that aren't necessarily game species. But again, when you're out in the water, pay attention to what you see, because there's always different kinds of species out there that you're just not really going to think about, or you're probably going to overlook. Even the things that are like these little micro species, like the minnows and the shiners, all the little bait fish. There's so much life that's happening underneath the water that we kind of just overlook trying to get to the big bass, right? So these Tennessee shiners are a really cool example of that. When they get their breeding colors, they turn this bright orange. So there's all kinds of cool stuff that you might see in these different little pockets of Tennessee that people just don't realize are out there. Those minnows and shiners can be a lot of fun to kind of go after for, little bait for catching bigger fish. You got creek chub, just all these funny little species that you'd be like, what is that? I didn't know what that was. You've got creek chubs. And then northern hog suckers. They've got this vacuum-like mouth. They're just kind of feeding along the bottom, sucking up all kinds of stuff off the bottom of these creeks. They're really cool fish to catch. A lot of times you'll might snag one on accident and be like, I don't know what this is. But they can actually get, pretty decent size depending on the size of the stream and all the different habitat that's under there. But hog suckers are a really interesting fish that a lot of people just aren't going to encounter unless you get in some of these smaller waterways. Stone rollers, these are really neat little fish. Again, they've got these little bumps on their head. You hear people call them horny heads and things like that. They actually will kind of filter around on the bottom again, and they pick up rocks and build nests, kind of like a bird will build a nest. I was watching TWRA, the Wildcast. They did a series probably about a year ago on small rivers and all the different fish that you find there, and I'm going to put a link to that in the resource email tomorrow, because they talked a lot about stone rollers and how they build their nest and why they're important. But again, another really cool little fish that you're just not going to see in some of these bigger lakes and rivers. Darters are really good, interesting species that are very, special to Tennessee. That one on the left is a redline darter, and then you've got snail darters. Those were actually just recently removed from the threatened and endangered species list. So that's a big conservation win for us here, not just in Tennessee, but in this whole region as well. So darters are really cool little fish that you'll find swimming around. Again, none of these are very big, but there's so much different interesting little species out there that you just otherwise wouldn't see if you were fishing from a boat in a big lake. John, before I go any further, do you have any insight there, just like on interesting species that you've seen or any of these we've talked about?
Yeah, darters are probably one of the most colorful, and they're usually barely an inch long. But there's a couple rivers around me where a lot of people will go snorkeling, and watch them. And I get a lot of I like to get up video of them on like a GoPro or something, and then look at them later because they're very cool. But a banded sculpin's another one that I've caught a couple of those. Or I remember the first one I caught, I was like, "What is this thing?" And it's similar to a darter but a bigger mouth. But yeah, there's a lot of those species you're probably not going to come across like catching wise, but they all help each other out. Like the one before the stone roller, I think they build the nests for like shiners and stuff, and they all these fish like kind of work together, and they're all busy doing all kinds of stuff. If you kind of just stop and really pay attention, or if you're in a clear enough stream where you can see them.
Yeah. That's just always one of the more interesting things to me when you get off in those little waterways and you actually start looking around. You see stuff that's just like, I had no idea that was there. And then, like you said, every now and then you catch one on accident and you're like, what is this? Like, I don't even know what this little guy is. So, but just an encouragement to, if you're out there, open your eyes and, look around, see what you see, take observation of things that are interesting or that look different. Because there's a lot of different stuff that you can find in Tennessee that you can't find anywhere else. So just a helpful encouragement there. All right, so let's get into actual like fishing. We're going fishing. What are some things that we need to know or be thinking of? And we're going to get into some gear and strategy talk here for a minute. So John, I'm going to lean on you a little more through this section to just kind of talk through, what are you looking for and things like that. But let's talk about for our game fish, those sunfish, the bass. What are those guys eating and how do we use that to our advantage? So similar to the last photo, one of the big things that you hear people talk about a lot, or at least what I heard people talk about a lot growing up, was your crawfish, or if you're like me, you call them crawdads. You're going to find a lot of these in most of your stream beds across the state, regardless of where you're at. I think you can find crawfish, but they like to hide out in those areas where they've got lots of rocks to get underneath. Bass love these guys. I know one of the last bass I ate, he had one that was halfway down, or one of the last bass I caught, he had eaten one of these and it was about halfway down his throat where he had just caught it. So they love eating crawfish. That's a great thing to keep in mind when you're going out to fish or think about throwing lures. They're looking for these little crustaceans that are crawling around at the bottom, underneath rocks and things like that. But other food sources, they're eating a lot of aquatic insects. In the trout class, we talked a lot about that. And kind of the different metamorphic stages of aquatic insects, from nymphs all the way up to their adult stages. Mayflies, dragonflies, all these different types of bugs that you find at different points in the year. They're eating a lot of aquatic insect. Other small fish, like those little bait species we talked about earlier, those are all kind of free game for a lot of those game fish to go after those. And then other crustaceans like snails, they're eating all kinds of different stuff down there. And some focus in on different species or different food sources than others, but a lot of them are kind of opportunistic, meaning they're just going to eat whatever they can find, whatever's available at different parts of the year. So just some things to take into account. John, I know you fish with a lot of different stuff, but any thoughts there kind of on what the fish are eating, what you're seeing out there when you're wading around in the water?
And one of the things that I really enjoy about small streams, I feel like the smaller, the more opportunistic the fish are, because if the smaller that little stream is, the smaller that little pool, the biggest fish that is in there, he's got to be the most aggressive. He's got to eat first, or the other fish are going to out eat him and out compete him. So they do compete for food. At the same time, there's some species that will only eat the snails. I think like a red ear, so a lot of times they eat the snails, and then like those little hog suckers and stuff, it's very hard to catch them on a lure because they're eating little bitty bugs and things like that. So it's a big variety, but most time when we're fishing with lures, we're looking for just that opportunistic fish that's, we're throwing a little bait, a little fish imitation or a little crawfish imitation, but usually, or little bugs, but usually it's something that as soon as it hits the water, that fish is running towards it because he thinks, I gotta go eat that before somebody else eats it.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about some different lures and stuff here in a second, but, going back to the very, very basics of fishing, just live bait too can be a great way to catch fish in any waterway. So you think about things like mealworms or little red wiggler worms, night crawlers. I mean, those are all things that fish are going to be eating as well. So I know that a lot of people, once you kind of get into fishing more, I feel like a lot of times we kind of put the live bait behind us and go for the other, artificial stuff. But that can be a great way if you're just wanting to catch some different species. Just a hook, bob, or a worm. A lot of times that can do you a lot of good as well. All right. So, John, I'm gonna let you lead here a little bit more, but just to kind of get into the conversation of gear. I've got a creek that I see near my house. I want to go fish. I don't really know what I need. I put this here as just kind of like a general recommendation, right? If you're going out to buy a new rod and reel, don't feel like you have to spend a lot of money, but just look for something that's going to be maybe on the lighter side, right? We probably don't need a big 7.5 foot heavyweight bait caster that we're going to be bass fishing big open water with. You probably don't need big, thick monofilament line. Lightweight stuff is usually going to do the trick. So why don't you just give us some ideas of, like, if you're brand new to it, you're wanting to get a gear set up, what are you looking for? What'd you start with?
Yeah, I think it first starts out with the mentality of what you're trying to catch. And if you're thinking, I'm going to go to this little creek that I can jump across, and I'm going to throw a big bass lure, well, you're probably not going to catch very many fish. You might catch a bass. There could be a 12-inch bass in there that eats your big spinnerbait, and I've done that on certain creeks. But that's comes with a lot of practice and a lot of trial and error to find the creeks. Most of the time, you're going and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to just try to catch anything from 4-inch to 12-inch fish, and that's bass and sunfish, really like panfish, all kind of mixed together. So what I suggest for everybody is a 6-foot ultralight rod, or light, actually, light or ultralight, and a 1,000 size reel if you're looking up reels. And you don't have to spend much. You can spend $25-$30 on a rod, $25-$30 on a reel. That's probably about you can find from, like, sometimes those $12 ones. If you spend less than $50 on your combo, you're getting a very, very cheap, flimsy combo that might actually deter you from fishing. So don't go like so cheap that it's like it's hard to fish with. But a 6-foot ultralight from $50 to $100 range, and I love 4-pound mono. 4-pound mono is super cheap, very easy. You can break it in your hands. If you were to take it and jerk it, you can break it, but it'll hold up and handle a lot of fish. A 1/16 ounce jig head or something in the 1/16 ounce range is something you can throw. It's a small hook with if you were to put either worms, like you take a little jig head and just put a little piece of red worm on there, or mealworm, or but don't get like big bass worms. Hooks. I mean, don't get big bass hooks. Remember, think small mouths. Smaller the hook, the more fish you catch. Now, it may only catch the smaller fish, but your fish catches are going to go up with the smaller the size you use. I would start out really small and kind of work your way up as you're learning. But get a little bit of worms, get a couple rooster tails, a couple little crappie lures, things that are 1 inch long. And just first off, start testing them out, learning how to cast them and practicing. And then I think the next step is once you kind of have your stuff, then you're starting to look through the creek, like, where do I want to cast into? And don't just cast out in the middle of the deepest pool and be like, all right, I'm leaving my lure there all day. Try little areas around, try moving around. Don't get stuck just fishing one little area, because there can be a lot of fish caught 15 feet away from where you're fishing. But if you don't try all the areas, you might not find them. And when I take people fishing all the time that aren't used to it, they're like, I can't catch anything. And I'm over here catching fish like crazy. I was like, well, because I've learned where they're at. So don't be afraid to try making casts over there off that log. You see a log or you see a bank. Fish want to be by something. They're not usually just out in the middle of nothing, other than like catfish and stuff a lot of times. So look for something to kind of cast at, and start small, work your way up to bigger things. Learn, you catch a bluegill on a ultralight rod, 4-pound line. he puts up a pretty good fight. Then you catch a 12, 13-inch bass, and that may be like the king of that little creek. And then if you get to bigger streams where you're kayaking, yeah, I've caught 4 and 5 pound fish out of the areas like that. But yeah, I start small and kind of get a handle on it and get some experience.
John, do you ever just experiment with different line types, like getting into messing with fluorocarbon and stuff like that, or you just kind of keep it simple for the most part?
And I've used everything now. I probably have 10 ultralight setups, and I have braid, I have fluorocarbon, I have mono, I have 2 pound line on one, up to like 15 pound braid to leaders. So there's a ton you can do with it, but I think 4 pound is just such a good all around starter, and it's super cheap. But you can, if people have already, you're like, I've done that, get some 8 or 10 pound braid and change it out and put it on your ultralight setup, and then put you a little like 4 pound leader. The sensitivity goes up 50%. It's a different feel to it. It's like, wow, this is something different. Or go down to 2 pound line, and you can throw little trout magnets, little 1/64 ounce lures, which I love doing, and that will catch. It'll be amazed how many fish you can catch on something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I always tell people. Like, again, with these virtual classes, we get people with different experience levels, so we always try to give something that's like on either extreme, and then kind of find the middle ground, right? And like, this is going to be kind of your all around, do everything type stuff. So I like that approach to it. All right, let's talk about lures. We mentioned some of these earlier by name, and John, I know you said start small. One of the favorite videos I think that I saw of yours, it's been a while ago. You went into a Walmart and spent like $2 on lures and just bought the little cheap stuff like beetle spins, those little small spinners. Went out and caught fish with them, and I always think that's so cool when people do that. It's like, let's just strip it down to kind of some of the basics and go out and see what happens. But those little beetle spins like that on screen, those are basically just a really small version of what you would throw for like a bigger bass spinner a lot of times. And it seems like at least you catch a lot of fish with them. You got any thoughts there?
Yeah, beetle spins is one I don't use a ton really, but it's so cheap and simple, and it is something that you can cover water with. I'd rather, if I'm throwing something like that, I'd rather throw a rooster tail or a Mepps spinner, and I think rooster tails are $2 or $3, and that's the kind of lure you're casting and retrieving, and you're like covering water, and that's a little, it's flashing and kind of coming through, and then like they got a little popper. That's more of a fly fishing lure, but a little popper will work. Or then you get a little jig head. If you're looking for lures, a jig head, then you throw it out and you kind of twitch it and let it kind of fall and sink. And then you can get little crankbaits, and your same thing, except they go a little deeper. So I would say get a variety of lures, and if you're starting one that does a few different things, and kind of just work your way through a few of them. Maybe in the same area before you move to another area. You might find that the little jigs and jig head works better in the slower water, because you can let that thing fall real slow. And then a rooster tail or something might work better in the faster water, because you're coming through fast. That fish has got to make a quick decision to go hit it. But yeah, you don't have to spend a lot. For $20, you can get everything you need as far as lure wise. You can get and more. But don't get too heavy. A lot of people get like a real heavy stuff. Remember, try using lightweight stuff. 1/16 ounce, 1/32 ounce jig heads. It sounds super light, and it is. But the lighter and the smaller you just catch more fish. If you're using like a big old 1/8 ounce jig head, that thing's falling. Say you're throwing it in a 2-foot deep hole, that thing's just hitting on the bottom. And the fish like it they like to see it swimming, look like a minnow. So if you get something real light, that's why I like trout magnets. You can let that thing fall, and it might take 5 seconds for it to fall all the way down the bottom. But that gives that fish time to look at it and think, and like, all right, I guess I'll go ahead and bite it.
Yeah. Yeah, so beetle spins, we've mentioned these several times, but those rooster tails, those are a little bit bigger than what we were talking about earlier. But rooster tails have caught so many different fish species. I mean, you could catch bass, you could catch those little panfish. I mean, you can catch trout with these. They come in all different types of colors, and they're easy to fish with. And so that's one of the things I always tell people is like, if you're just trying to go out and catch some fish, like don't overlook a rooster tail. You can get a handful of those for $5 at the store. So
And
rooster tail,
they make all sizes now. They got little
yep.
bitty ones up to huge ones. So they vary in size.
Yep, yep. And then we mentioned those crankbaits earlier. Again, going back to those food sources, you can get these little crawdad crankbaits. I've caught a lot of little fish with those. Even those little. I've noticed those little small, minnows and the shiners and things like that. When you throw those little lures out there, a lot of times they like to follow it. They like that movement. And they'll chase after stuff that's as big as they are. But those crawdad little crankbaits can be great resource, a great tool for you as well. I fish with those a lot. That's one of the things that's always in my tackle box. I've got the real small ones, and you can get those bigger ones that you throw out, bigger lakes and stuff. But the bass really love eating those things up as well. And then again, we talked about those minnows and shiners being bait fish. They're getting eat all the time, so you can throw little minnow crankbaits, all kinds of stuff out there as well. So. Let's see. I think we got a few questions here, John. Some of these you've already touched on, but I'll go through them again. We can just kind of highlight everything. All right, here's one. I think this one will strike a chord with you. I've heard you say this 1,000 times watching your videos, but what about hellgrammites? Do you fish with those? Obviously, I know you do, but tell us a little bit more about kind of what you're doing with that.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all can see this or not. I can't see the camera, but this is a big one. But a hellgrammite, if you don't know what it is, it's an insect that grows in creeks, and they're mainly in like the clearer streams from what I know, but they're all throughout Tennessee. But the thing is, this little lure, it works anywhere. It works to me the best in moving current because I like throwing them. Usually a 3-inch one, and there's a lot of different brands out there actually, but if you look up hellgrammites, there's lots of different ones you can use, and I like throwing them up in the current and let them bounce down like a trout fisherman would with his lure. But you throw it up and let it bounce down the current, and the fish, like in that picture we saw earlier, if that lure bounces right down into front of him, he's picking that up and eating it. It's also just looks like a little bug or little something that's easy. Almost all fish I guess they like the taste of it. I think the hellgrammites are like really good for fish from what I know, but it's a great little lure. You don't have to do much with it, and that's the best thing. I throw it on a 1/16 ounce jig head, and that's my favorite smallmouth bass fishing lure is a hellgrammite. And I'm usually throwing it on a little heavier setup. You can throw it on a light action rod, but I like to throw it on like a medium, so a little bit heavier where I can get a good hook set. But I throw it into looking for current, throwing it into there, and just kind of let it fall to the bottom. And the fish will eat it on the way to the bottom. They'll pick it up off the bottom, but if just kind of don't do a lot with it. It's so simple. I feel like people do too much, and that's with a lot of lures. A lot of times, do less with your lures gives those fish more time to look at it. But yeah, I'm huge on hellgrammite, especially if you want to get smallmouth bass. They love the hellgrammite.
I'll say we had a follow-up question there, specifically for smallmouth. So are there any other soft plastics that you'd recommend for smallmouth besides the hellgrammite? Anything you use?
Soft plastic crawls are good. And even stick baits, like 4 or 5 inch stick bait. I use a Yum Dinger, a 4-inch Yum Dinger all the time. I've caught lots and lots on those. A lot of times there's a little bit smaller profiled ones. Smallmouth have a little bit smaller mouth than largemouth if you're used to largemouth fishing. So they can hit big lures, but a lot of times they like a little bit smaller lure they can just kind of grab and eat. But like 3-inch up to 4-inch bait at the biggest.
Gotcha. All right, got a lot of questions here. Sorry, I'm just kind of filtering through them. If I don't hit yours now, we'll try to hit it at the end. Talking about just different baits and types of lures and things like that. There's lots of different colors to choose from when it comes to all the different baits you could throw. How do you like to determine what color to use? Is it based off location, time of year, the water clarity? What colors are you liking to use?
Oh yeah, that I have no idea. So this is a good one because I've fished in the kayak national championship, and I did like really well. I've done really well bass fishing and like kayaking world, and I still have no idea what color works best when. And I throw some of the dumbest colors just to mess with people. Like this, I got this Hellgrammite here. Yum Hellgrammite is a bubblegum lemon swirl. It's a pink and yellow, and I've caught so many big fish on that thing, and it looks like nothing that would. It doesn't look like a Hellgrammite. No Hellgrammites are that color, not that I know of. But don't let color bog you down. Have two or three colors. I really like a dark black is my favorite for like the Hellgrammites, or if you're any kind of get a black one, a white one, and maybe like a chartreuse. Like for the most part, you don't need that many. Now, if you get lake fishing and you're fishing for finicky fish, stuff like that can come into play. But don't let colors be like, well, I don't have the right color. Usually two colors of something is all you're going to need, and streams. And a lot of times if they're just not hitting that color, and change up your presentation of how you're fishing. But yeah, so I don't know. I talk to people all the time about color, and it does matter sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't make a difference.
Well, and that's kind of the thing that gets in my head too, is just trying to keep it simple, don't overthink it. And when I watch a lot of your stuff on YouTube, it seems like you throw a lot of just natural colors too, like not trying to be too fancy or anything like that, and just keeping it simple. So that's good. All right, I got a couple questions here. I'm going to kind of combine a few questions just because they're kind of similar. Some of the lures have, I think this is kind of referring to some of your soft plastics and things like that. Some of the lures have the hooks pointing up, kind of on the top side of the lure, and others have it kind of on the bottom side of the lure. Does it matter? And then as a side piece to that, how do you keep from getting hung up when you're out there fishing in small creeks?
Yeah, you're gonna get hung up. There's almost no way avoiding that because rock ledges and just the way logs are. I don't like using open hook on a soft plastic lure because I want to be able to throw it into little spots that there's no way not to get hung up. So if you can fish it, and they call it Texas rigged on bass worms like that, but weedless. If you can fish that lure weedless, that's going to give you a huge advantage as far as letting you be more free with where you're throwing the lure. Now it'll still get hung up sometimes, but I like on my Hellgrammites, I run it through the side and like have it coming up the side where the hook's not sticking out on an offset jig head hook. Same thing with like a Yum Dinger or something. So if I'm more confident in not getting hung up, it's going to let me have more confidence to throw it so many more places. And doing that allows you to catch so many more fish. If you're like, well, I'm going to get hung up, I throw in there, then you're just eliminating a whole area that the fish could be hiding in. But you're like, well, I'm going to get hung up. So either learning how to get your lure back without being stuck, or just rigging it weedless where it's not going to get hung up when you kind of reel it back out of areas. That's going to help a lot.
All right, couple more here. Let's see. I think I had a good one. Yeah, right here. So we talked about aquatic insects earlier. John, I don't know if you do a whole lot of fly fishing, but do you have any resources or anywhere that you would recommend, finding some good intel on the aquatic insects for fishing Middle Tennessee? Like if you're this time of year going out to fish, where are you looking for that kind of information, if you are?
No, I don't really pay attention too much to what like the natural things are for those areas. It's more of like what the water clarity is. If it's clear streams, I fish a little different than muddy streams. The clearer the water is, the more they fish the fish feed on site. And then the muddier, it's more like the vibrations and sounds stuff, but also different times of the year. And it's just you can be wrong and not know what you're doing and catch fish, or you can have it all dialed in and not catch fish. So
Yeah.
um, a lot of just practice and just going. Really.
Yeah, that's to say, as far as resources go, I know Orvis has a lot of helpful information on like match to hatch type stuff, knowing what to look for. Trout Unlimited has some good resources on, the aquatic insect side for fly fishermen, if that's something you're interested in. So I would check those, their websites out, see if they have anything. I might try to link some of those in the resource email tomorrow as well.
I would say trout fishing is definitely different than if you're just trying to catch warm water species like the sunfish and bass, where a trout can get in a funk. I fish from a little bit, but they can really be in a mood where they're only eating one thing. Yeah. And I've seen that where there's hundreds of trout and I can't get them to touch what I'm throwing. And then at other times they'll hit anything. But for the most part, sunfish, as far as like the warmer water species, they're more opportunistic.
Yep. All right, one more question here, John, and then I'm going to move on to talking about some access and how to find a place to go fish. I got a lot of questions on that. But one more question here on gear. You talked about a leader earlier. For somebody that's not familiar with what a leader is, could you just explain that real quick?
Yeah, a leader is so you have your main line. So when I fish for smallmouth bass in streams, I use a 6'9" medium fast rod. And I usually use 10 to 15 pound braid, but braid gets cut real easily on rocks. Now you can tie your lure straight to the braid and catch fish. And yes, fish might see your line, but for the most part, fish don't know what line is. So there's a whole debate on that. But what I like to use is 10-pound fluorocarbon leader line, and I'll add 6 to 8 foot of line on the end of my braid. And fluorocarbon is also supposedly invisible to fish, but also it's very abrasive resistance where if a fish takes you in rocks. So it's just like a safety net on the end of your line. And what I tie a double uni knot, UNI, just a simple knot. There's lots of different knots out there. Whatever you get into in fishing, there's a whole rabbit hole of like a million different ways to do stuff. So anything I've said, somebody could fish totally opposite than me, everything I said, and catch fish. So don't take one thing and be like, this is the only way. There's so many different ways to do everything fishing related. I'm just trying to say what I use and what, I've learned and what's helped me.
Yeah. We got a lot of questions on access. So I want to ask you a few of those questions here in a second, but I want to cover this last little section before we do, and then we'll just save time for questions at the end. If you are somebody that's like kind of brand new to this whole fishing thing and or you're wanting to find a place where you can access without having a boat, there's a lot of helpful resources online that you might or might not have seen, but a lot of people just don't know that TWRA has these. They have a digital, like online interactive map where you can get on and see all these different waterways and zoom in on locations where there's boat ramps, where there's public access. And I learn a lot every time I get on there. I've been fishing for a long time, and every time I get on there, I'm like, oh, I didn't know there was this over there. There's just so much water in Tennessee, you're never going to cover it all. But if you go to just do like a quick search for TWRA fishing access map or something like that, I'll put the link in the email tomorrow. But it'll bring you to something that looks like this. And so this is just a screenshot, but you can scroll around and zoom in on all these different waterways that you see. And once you do, it'll look something like this. You'll start seeing all these different little icons pop up. These little icons here are like the trout stocking schedules. You can see that, but it'll also have, little places where there's boat ramps, where there's marinas, things of that nature. But a lot of times, wherever you see these little icons, that's good access points where TWRA is pulling up their fish trucks and doing their stocking. So whether it's trout or whatever else you're fishing for, you can kind of use that to get an idea of where a good place to get in and out would be. And again, you can click on those icons and it'll tell you a little bit more about, what's the name of that stream? How do I get there? What's the location? And then it'll have any other specific rules maybe, but you can always click on those hyperlinks and it'll take you to the online fish fishing guide, where you can look at all the regulations and things like that. That's another really helpful resource. Just read your fishing regulations guide, and it'll have a list of all these different streams in the different regions of the state, and how, where to find them and things like that. But this is again just a tool that a lot of people are using to find the fish stockings, but it's also can be helpful just to know where I can get in and get out. You can do all kinds of cool filters and layer topo maps on top of it. You can have satellite imagery so you can actually see what it looks like. It's very helpful. You don't necessarily need this to get out and go fishing. I'm sure some of you just know of where some creeks and public access is. A lot of public parks that have creeks running through them, you can go fish those. A lot of state parks, places like that have fishing access as well. So just do some homework online. But if you're ever out just riding around, and you see an interesting spot, that's another way to kind of just scout out new locations. There's other apps out there. This is one that I've used in the past a little bit. It's, people still kind of use it. It's called FishBrain, where you can get on here and just kind of see all these different little points where people are, marking where they're catching fish and things like that. So it's a helpful little community app that people sometimes use to share ideas and comment on how the fishing's going in different parts of the world and things like that. So you could use that to your advantage at times as well. But anyway, just another thing to think about when you get into looking for access. But obviously we got a lot of questions on access and finding a place to fish. And, John, you do this a lot full time now, so I'm sure you have all different types of experiences, whether you're wading or kayaking. I guess it would be helpful to start by just, what's your process when you first started getting out there, learning how to do all this for the first time? What did that look like? What were you looking for? Was there any resources you used?
I mean, I didn't really. I had heard about the TWRA one, but that right there is actually really nice. I'm on there right now, and you can zoom in little areas. It shows you boat ramps, but it also shows you access points. And now that I've kayak, I'm always looking for every kind of access point I can get. If it's public in Tennessee, you're allowed, and if it's a navigable waterway, you're allowed to put your kayak in there and float. First off, the thing is the easiest way, like as you said, is parks, and just type in your town and Greenway, or the town next to you and Greenway or park, and then is there a creek running through it? Because I fish so many parks that they'll have 5-10 mile long sidewalk along a creek or stream or river in the town, and there's fish in there. I mean, there's fish everywhere. It might not be your trophy size fish, but if you just want some access, that's good access. After that, I'm on Google Earth, just looking around. I know I think Farwide. I think it's Farwide is an app that you can type in a river and it'll show you all the access points on it. There's an app that I used to use a lot that it just showed is all parks. I forgot the name of it. I can't think of what it's called, but it'll just it just shows parks. It'll just like any kind of like national park to local parks. And if you're in East Tennessee, we have so much national forest, all kinds of public land that we're allowed to use and go all over. And there's streams running all through those, and it's all public to just as long as you're. Some of it's, in the winter, some of it's, blocked off for hunting, but for the most part, it's all public. And there's all kinds of waterfalls that are on parks that are huge. I've been to so many waterfalls and I fish either around them. That's just nobody's thinking about that, but a lot of times you go to a waterfall for swimming or just for fun. I use all these things that people use and I just see if there's water. Of course, Google Earth, but the best way, especially if you're trying to find something local, is just get out and drive around. And, a lot of bridges you can see, you'll pull up to a bridge and you'll see where people have been accessing it for kayaking or for fishing, and it's like, oh, I'm going to fish right here. Or you'll just find something random. I don't want to tell anybody to trespass, but you have to get out there and look. Like, you have to get your eyes thinking about fishing in small streams. That's the first step. And I have a place, one of my favorite places is right in the middle of town. It's right between the road and all these businesses, and it's probably 100-yard stretch. I'll go there and catch 20 fish out of it, and they're little fish, but some of them get pretty good size in there. But all these people driving by are just looking over, and it's never crossing their mind to go fish there. So I think the main thing is open up your mind to where fish can be, and it's okay to go fish on the side of the road or somewhere where you just see a little bit of access. Like, hey, I'm going to go cast in there. It might seem silly, like, there's nothing in there. You don't know. You don't know until you get down there and see.
Yeah, and we got a lot of people asking about, like, I'm in this part of the state. What are some ideas for where I could go and things like that. I mean, if you're like me and you live here in Knoxville, you've got all kinds of stuff. One of the easiest places to start looking is like tailwater streams, like below a dam. Like, we've got Norris Lake here just north of Knoxville. Well, you can go fish down below Norris and find places to fish. The Clinch River is a great option for people that want to fish for trout, but there's also smallmouth and all kinds of other stuff in there. And a lot of those places are wadeable. You can get out and find places to go. Somebody asked about Northeast Tennessee. Up there, we just did a fishing event on the Watauga in Elizabethton. You've got the Doe River. Sevierville's got, the Little Pigeon, all these different places you could go fish. It's not that they're great big secrets or anything, and they don't have to be. You can go to a public access place and catch plenty of fish, just like what John was saying. So, I don't know, just get out there, check out those maps. Those are always really helpful. Look for city parks, state parks, anywhere like that has water, and just kind of get on the online mapping stuff and look around. That's one of the biggest resources for me when I'm doing hunting, fishing, anything like that. I get on the maps and just look around at different options. I grew up in Middle Tennessee, so we fished the Harpeth River quite a bit. Drake's Creek in Hendersonville, I grew up right there. So me and my brother, we would ride our bikes up to the park before we could even drive with a fishing pole, and we'd get in and wade up the creek and catch all kinds of stuff. So there's all kinds of places. Anywhere that you can find water, you're going to find fish for the most part in Tennessee. But just some helpful resources there. I know we're getting short on time, so I want to do our last little knowledge check, and then if y'all have any other specific questions for me or John, I'd be happy to answer those. But let me get this post knowledge check launched, and then we'll start wrapping up. I know we're John. While they're doing that, you got any trips lined up or anything? I know you're fishing. It feels like almost every day, I'm sure. But you going anywhere exciting anytime soon?
Well, for anybody that's interested, if you go to my YouTube account, Creek Fishing Adventures, I just posted a video kayaking a creek in Middle Tennessee, and it is one of the most gorgeous creeks that you'll ever come across. And I didn't even know it existed. There's so many streams out there that I still haven't been to. My goal is to get to like every creek in Tennessee, especially if it's kayakable. There is a lot. You might have to put in a little bit of work. I know a lot of people want to find something 5 minutes down the road, but that's just not realistic for the most part. Think 30 to 45 minutes, and start looking around your house, and you'll probably be surprised what you come across. But I'm actually heading up to Cookeville Thursday morning to meet up with a couple guys. I don't know exactly. I think I might be fishing the Roaring River. Now, that's a pretty well-known river. It's pretty long. It goes from like waterfalls to slow parts. But there's a bunch of streams around Cookeville. Obviously, you got the what's the lake up there everybody fishes? Dale Hollow. Yeah. But like every lake that we have so many lakes that are dammed up, rivers that are dammed up. They all have creeks that feed into them, and most of the time you can drive around and get access from the lake to all those creeks, and you can wade up them or find access and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm planning to go all summer. And mostly Tennessee stuff, but I may get out of state a little bit here, a little bit.
I got you. Well, let's wrap this up, and then I got some other questions for you here. So I'm going to end this poll, and I'll share the results, and we'll just read through them. So A stream with shallow depths, cooler water temps, and rocky bottoms most likely has this type of flow. Fast. So we talked about that earlier. Again, a generalization. Not every stream is going to be the exact same, but most of the time that's going to be the case. Which of the following game species of fish can be found in small streams? We talked about smallmouth. We talked about red ears, rock bass, and green sunfish. So all of the above. You guys got that one. Good job. And then this section of a stream is where the water flow swirls backwards, forming a calm spot where food sources and debris like to gather. The correct answer was eddy. So you guys did pretty good there. Nice to know that we weren't speaking a complete, total foreign language. So good to know. All right. Well, that is going to bring us to the end of tonight's class. Me and John are going to stay for just a few minutes and answer any last-minute questions. But I know we went over on time a little bit. So if you got to run, feel free to do that. Be on the lookout for the recording coming later this week. Check out all of our socials on Instagram, Facebook. We've got YouTube stuff as well. John, I think, is on all of those platforms as well, so you can find his stuff there. And I'll link all his stuff in our resource email as well. So be sure to check out his stuff. You're doing a lot of cool stuff across the state and promoting all of our natural resources. So it's always good to see local folks that have such a big reach and impact like you've got. So that's always really exciting for me anyway.
I'll add one. Let me add one thing for anybody that's still here. A lot of new people, like this happens a lot, come across my channel and they ask, where is that? And that's a question that if on YouTube, I hate. Now, if you're a friend of mine and ask me, that's totally different. But just know, especially smaller the body of water, just know that people, that's not, I guess it's not an acceptable question. You can ask it, but it's kind of a rude question to ask something from somebody to share their spot that they found. Now, if you got friends or if you want to ask people where stuff is, I mean, that's how we all know places from friends sharing stuff. But you know, social media wise, I'm not going to share the name of a little stream that's 3 or 4 hours from my house or it's in my backyard on social media. Now I might tell it to, my buddies or take them, but fishing wise, you have to put the work into it. If you want to find the good stuff, you have to put your own work into finding it. And a lot of that might be just watching videos, studying. Oh, I saw a bridge. I know where that bridge is. You're looking on here, you're following. If you follow me on Instagram, I share a lot more places than I do on my YouTube because I have a smaller following. So, that's just one thing I want to bring up because a lot of people think, hey, they think it's rude for us not to share everywhere we fish. And it's not, that's not the case. We're not being rude by not sharing it. It's just, maybe it took me years to find this spot and I'll share it with my friends. You go find your own and share it with your friends.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's the same with the hunting side of things as well. Yeah. I spend a lot more time in the woods than I do on the water probably. And it's the same thing. People are always like, well, where was that at? And, I'm guilty of asking those similar questions as well. And nobody wants to give up any kind of secret spot. But one of the things I try to do, because I am in the business and the job of like promoting and trying to help people get out there, I'll speak of very well-known places to start, like, or use big terms, like if it's a certain WMA or something. Like some people think that's even too far. Like, oh, don't tell them what piece of land you're on. I might not drop you a pinpoint of exactly what tree I was on or what stream I was in, but I like to speak in broad terms because I want people to kind of do their own homework, right? That's a lot of what we're trying to do is give people the opportunity and the resources to go do it on their own. It's not we're not necessarily like a guide program, right? Like we have options where you can come out and do this stuff with us, but our goal is to make it to where you are confident in your ability to go out and do these things. So yeah, I think that's a great point. I don't think anybody should ever think, you're hiding something necessarily, just because there's a lot of local people that probably wouldn't want you sharing that. But yeah, I think you take a good approach to it. I've never thought that you were, being overly secretive or anything. So that's good info though.
When I did a trip last summer, I kayaked across 5 places and across Tennessee. And there's actually one of the rivers I fished. There's no public access, but they have a kayak guide service. Now, if you just type in like kayak guide services in your area, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people that you can rent a kayak from them, or you can bring your own, and you can go down some areas that nobody else is getting access to really. That's a great way to find, get to new fishing areas also.
For sure. And even if you got, friends or family that are landowners that backs up to a creek or something like that too, that's a great place to put in and out. Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people that have done that. All right. I think we've answered most of these questions actually. So John, I appreciate you jumping on and joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you around, and I always look forward to seeing your videos and stuff come across my notifications on YouTube. So keep up the good work, man. I hope to see you at something here soon. We've got all kinds of stuff on the schedule. We need to get you back to an in-person event here soon.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on. This is fun.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks again for joining. I'll send out all the resources at some point later this week. We've only got a few virtual classes left for our fiscal year. For you guys, they're going to keep rolling out, but we're kind of winding down our year now. So be sure to check out some of those last few virtual classes we've got on the schedule. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. If we didn't answer your question, feel free to send me an email. And if I don't know the answer, I'll try to get one from John and we can pass it along. But until then, thank you guys for joining. And thank you, John, for all your help tonight.
Yes, sir.
All right. See you guys. Y'all have a good rest of your night.